Femeile reprezintă jumătate din populația planetei, dar implicarea lor în economia mondială nu este la nivelul optim. Educația STEM, adică știință, tehnologie, inginerie și matematică, este mai puțin asociată cu tinerele care merg la studiu, iar acesta este un dezavantaj profund. Slujbele viitorului sunt strâns legate de tehnologie și lipsa acestor competențe vor face să sufere nu doar femeile, ci și economia mondială. Chiara Cozarra a primit de la președintele Emmanuel Macron misiunea să regleze această situație, măcar la nivelul statelor G20. Discutăm toate detaliile imediat. Sunt Cristina Cileacu, începe Pașaport Diplomatic. Chiara Cozarra, representative for the private sector at G20 Empower Alliance and also the G7 Gender Equality Advisory Council. Welcome to Diplomatic Passport.
Good morning. Thank you so much.
President Emmanuel Macron gave you this mission, let's call it like that, to support and develop women's work in the G20, but you already were doing this before receiving this official mission. Why are women important in the world economy?
I think that women are not important, that women are really essential. And before I've been named by French government, they have been entrusted by a mission on how to prepare women and girls to accede to the jobs of the future. And this mission was really a national plan for France, where we really need more women. And my report was Women at the Heart of the Economy. In Europe, if women and men were equally represented in an economy, our GDP would be 20% higher. 20% higher in Europe. And worldwide, we know by McKinsey, by many studies, that the support of women in economy would contribute to give $28 trillion more to the world economy. Then it's not just important, it's essential. And the second reason, it's because in this moment, the world is really facing a polycrisis, unexpected, unprecedented polycrisis, financial, social, economic, security, food, war at our doors, of course energy, and this in a climate urgency. And this polycrisis comes exactly to add in addition to an undergoing revolution that existed before, that was the digital and tech revolution. And if you see the challenges of this polycrisis in all these fields, you see that we need all talents. I always say that when a general wants to fight and gain a battle, he takes all talents, all resources. And this is exactly what we're not doing. We leave half of the planet out of the system. And why? It's a question of numbers. Because all these kind of jobs, all these kind of issues need competence in specific fields that are linked with STEM education, science, technology, mathematics, engineering. And women are not there. Women worldwide are only 20% of engineers, 20%. And when you have to build a bridge, you need a good engineer. Then it's a man who will do the bridge. This is why it is important, because we need all talents on board. And we need the contribution, the world really need the contribution also of women. Not better than men, but different, and with specific talent that can really be very important. Look at climate change. Climate change, this nexus between climate change and women, then we need them at the table of negotiation. We need them because we know that they're the first victims. We know that the women die 14 times more than men. 80% of the refugees of climate change are women. But we don't use the contribution of women to fight against climate change. And we know that women would like to be, were able to be.
Well,
there.
Your report, Women at the Heart of Economy, literally have to shift the mindset, because traditionally in many societies, I should say perhaps in all societies, women were directed towards jobs that are less technical, less scientific. Do you think this mindset can be shifted?
I think it can be shifted, and you have a paradox, something that it's very strange to understand, but in a way very natural. First, for instance, in Italy, in France, in many countries, like say, all the traditional democracies. You have on one side the humanities and the other side the hard science. Then immediately, when you think that a girl wants to be a nurse, she wants to be a teacher, she wants to work for a purpose, since ever, we want to care, take care of people. That's natural, I mean. But if we don't explain to girls that humanities now are not enough and that you need competence if you want to work for a purpose, that it's better that you invent the vaccine, or it's better that you invent the mock that gives you the possibility to teach, or it's better that you invent a robot who will take care of the person instead of being in traditional old system. And if you explain to girls that if they want to work for purpose, for instance, to fight against climate change, that they need to have competence in environment transition, in ecological transition. Otherwise, they will not be able to fight against the climate change. And I will give an example. When they want to become CEOs because they want to change the companies, they want to work for good, etc. I always tell them, okay, but if you don't have the right competence to become a manager, you cannot just because you want to, because at the end of the day,
you need how to know to do stuff.
Talent has no gender. I mean, you need to be competent in what you want to do, to make. At stereotypes, you're right. I did a poll 2 years ago, worldwide in the G20 countries, with a good range of people who have been interviewed. 4 on 10 of the people, men and women, responded that the brain of women is different than the brain of man, and the brain of woman, it's more adapted for care, for humanities, and the man brain, it's more adapted to science. 3 years ago.
Your approach is, your philosophical approach when it comes to work is working together, working among ourselves as countries, as communities, as various cities all over the globe. But then again, another way of living in society is not to trust the rest, is to stay in your own small circle. How can we explain better that we can be stronger if we work together, and especially if we work together as countries?
You see, I think that that's thanks to my education and my parents. We always have been very open-minded. We traveled a lot. We have been changed. For instance, I was born in Italy, but when I was 16 years old, I had visited all the countries behind the Rideau de Fer, because our parents wanted us to see how it was. We visited and we changed, and we had friends also from in other countries. And that gave me also this open-mindedness to try to understand the others. You never criticize, to be very tolerant, to understand that each of us can enrich us. And when I arrived in France 40 years ago, the first thing that I did, and I'm very proud of that, I arrived at the most rich region in Europe, and we started from scratch. I mean, we could invent what we wanted to do. And the first thing that I proposed was to create an association of worldwide metropolis, the great metropolis in the world. And you know why? Because I had heard that in Cairo, there was 1,500 people each day entering the city without housing, without electricity, without the way to treat waste. I mean, it's a lot. Then you have to imagine how the city is capable. And I said, we can, in this association, exchange our best practices and also failures. Did what we did, for instance, the satellite cities around Paris was a good idea or not? Could we reproduce it in Cairo or in Tokyo or somewhere else? And that was a good way, you know, to work together. And it was very efficient because, of course, you don't transpose exactly in Beijing what you do in Moscow. But there are some, you know, again, good practices and way of taking into account the needs of the population that can be shared. And the other thing I did, always in that spirit, it was to create a network of agreement of cooperation, bilateral cooperation with other cities, where we change again how we can invent together the mobility, how we can make it more efficient, how we can project ourselves in innovation. And you know, when you work with different talents worldwide and with different mentalities, you're better, always better. You remember all the inventions I always said are doing around the coffee machine. because you're talking around.
To each other,
or taking a glass of wine in the evening when you're all brainstorming about things. This is very important, and it's the same for women. I think that we have to be, you know, this sisterhood, this solidarity, this way to say, you know, we did something important in a country, we can reproduce in the other countries. It's what I do on a daily basis. I really try to bring to companies, to head of state, to people, to say, we can do it, we did it, it worked. Why we don't reproduce it? For instance, there is something I'm working a lot, it's governance. Because governance, at the end of the day, it's leadership. And leadership, you cannot say like that, I want to be a leader. Again, you have to learn, to propose.
It's also a service, governance, yes.
It's a service. Yeah. It's a service to the society. Yeah. You know, my grandfather was one of the most famous philosophers in Europe. It was Acri, and he was the big expert of Plato. And you know what Plato said? The best governance in the world is the governance of philosophers, because they work for the common good. They don't work for their personal interest. I don't say that each of leaders should be a philosopher, but he should be guided by this willingness to work for good. And this is something that you prepare yourself. And I wanted to come back to governance, because this is important for Romania. I'm not a quota woman. I've been in many boards before quota existing, and I was personally against. But I had to confess that I was wrong, because if you have a legal frame, things accelerate. If you don't have a legal frame, they don't. In France, in 2011, we had 10% of women in the boards. Now we are 46.3%. If you look all the countries in the world where you don't have quotas, you have no more than 25-26%, including the States, including in Canada, including with all what has been done to promote women in governance. And now we have another law that I try to promote worldwide, and I think I will succeed. This is why it's so important to work with heads of state and government in G7 and G20, because those are the richest countries and have the responsibility to lead by example. They have the responsibility to be those who prepare a frame that can be applied then in other countries. And coming back to this law that I really contributed to write, and I'm very proud of this because it's unique worldwide, and it has been voted unanimously during the COVID, and a member of the Congress wanted to enlarge the success of the boards at the level of the executive committee. That means, in fact, that each company in France has now its mandatory target to have at least 30% of women in the governance. And this is a law that should be maybe applied in Romania or in other states. It's not very complicated, and it works.
Speaking about Romania, unfortunately, we are one of those countries where women are not in position of power, in a position of taking decisions in politics, in institutions of state. They are rather in the middle management level or even lower. Good professional, I have to add that, but not in position of power. Is it a way of disregarding women as well?
I think that's certainly that. It's certainly a kind of change of mentality, as you say, change of mindset. But this can be done, again, if women work together with men, demonstrating that they're useful to the society. They don't need to be promoted, but in fact that their contribution is vital to the economy and the society. I will tell you a story. I was in Mexico during when just Claudia Sheinbaum arrived as a mayor, and we worked a lot together. And then I was all the time on the media because there was a big event with many personality comments worldwide at this Women's Forum, including Christine Lagarde, etc. And I went to the first emission, economic and emission of the television, because I don't want to make emission on women. I mean, we are there to contribute, as I told you, in climate change, in AI, in tech, in health, in finance, in everything. I mean. And I went to this very famous and very prestigious interview, opening the paper of the evening, I mean the mission of the evening, and there was a man like that. Yes, tell us about your form. And I said, you know, for Mexico we could add 30%, sorry, how much? How much did you say? I gave facts and figures. Immediately they reacted. Then when we women, we talk about things that we know. We give evidence. Now, the sovereign funds, including the Norwegian sovereign funds, when they invest, they look at the governance. And if there's not at least 30% of women, they don't put money. It's business. You see, this kind of things give you strength if you see that others can do it. I'm sure that in Romania there are such wonderful women that they will be able to very soon take the power, and again, not for them. And you know what is very important? It's go to vote.
Take the power, but not for them. Maybe,
not for them.
Can you explain this a little more in details? Because usually the power is for somebody. Women have this generosity of sharing the power.
You know, I always say, Chiara, you're very ambitious. I say, yes, I'm very ambitious, but not for myself. I'm very ambitious for the project that I carry on. And I really want them to be implemented and that they work. And for that, I'm capable to fight. And the same for power. You don't take power for yourself. You take power because power gives you the possibility, the opportunity to do things, to work on purpose. I come back on the purpose. Then the most powerful you are, and the most you have the capacity to change things in the sense that you want. That's why we were just talking about election just before this interview. That's why I think that this year there's a huge opportunity worldwide. There's 5.3 billion people going to vote in the world.
Worldwide, yeah.
Are women going to vote? Are women going to choose who they want? Are women going to go to election to present themselves? Because you need courage to do it. It's a commitment. I mean, politics is tough. Then do we women prefer to stay home and say, okay, I will not be represented as I want, or do we want to go and fight to say, I want that my values, that my ideals, my objectives will be fulfilled by somebody I believe in. I will to send somebody who represents me and what I want. 3 weeks ago, I had the honor to invite the Nobel Prize, Alexander Mitrovic, in one of the events that I was organizing in Marseille, and she said something that it's really touched me a lot. She said, bravery has no gender. Bravery has no gender. We women have to be brave. We have to dare. Otherwise, we will never be able to do what we want. We really have to fight for our rights, not for ours, but for the next generation. What we do, it's really for our children, for our grandchildren. What we do is that they deserve a better world. And this is why we want to have power. Again, not for ourselves, because the power is complicated. I mean, the power, it's a job.
It's a job and a heavy burden at the same time.
But that's why I say not for ourselves, but because it's our mission to do something for the others.
You were nominated among the 100 women by the newspaper La Repubblica that changed the world, and also
I tried.
And also an even bigger nomination was to be one of the legend of the decade at the World Economic Forum. What changes are still needed at the world?
I have to tell you, I'm quite optimistic, because now we know the problem, we know the solution, we know what we should do. We know many things. We have evidences of the role of women, of the role of men, of what should be done, of what this planet needs. Then I think that, you know, my job is really to raise the attention, to sensibilize important decision makers, both in the public and private sectors. And I see that it works. You have now at least an acknowledgement of the importance of. And it was not the case 5 or 6 or 10 years ago. Then I don't say that the world is changing fast enough, but there are very positive things that are happening. And also maybe the fact that there are this conscience that we cannot continue as it was before, because we cannot continue to spoil the planet, we cannot continue to waste, we cannot continue to the injustice, etc. Then this is acknowledgement. And there's some goodwill. More and more companies have now this objective to work for good, to work for, I mean, they're trying at least. Then I'm optimist, and again, I think that if we are able to involve as much talent as possible of women in this change, the world will be better.
Thank you so much for this interview.
Thank you.
Atât pentru astăzi, dar rămânem în continuare online pe pagina de Facebook a emisiunii și pe contul nostru de X. Revenim cu subiecte noi din lumea diplomației și a politicii externe, vinerea viitoare de la 11:30 și reluare sâmbătă după miezul nopții. La revedere!